We are halfway through January. You know what that means. Hey everyone, it's Mary. Welcome back to my channel. And we are halfway through January, which means it is time for a January mid-month wrap up, which I'm kind of excited about. I've read 10 books so far this year. You guys have heard about some of these books in earlier vlogs, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through all 10 of these as quickly as I can. I've been told by a few people that my recaps are way too long, so we'll see if I can somehow shorten these a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. Book number 1, starting off strong with Relentless Hunter by Maggie Cole. I did talk about this book in some detail in my Mafia Wars video that I did a little bit ago. I'll link it up here in case you haven't seen it already. And I'll, again, put my book covers over here. Let me see if I can move this over a little bit so you can see a little better. So yes, Relentless Hunter by Maggie Cole. This was the very first book. It came out on January 1st, so it was my New Year's present for myself from Maggie. Thank you, Maggie, for my New Year's present. Anyway, this is the last book in the Mafia Wars series and the book that we have all been waiting for. Anyone who's been reading through this series. So good, and I was excited to see a video from Taji, which I will link below. She also did a video about Mafia Wars. One of my favorite series. This book, I can't really tell too many details without ruining the whole storyline, but I can tell you some that not really, it's on the books. Not really been much of a spoiler. It's a story of Finn and Brenna. And Brenna and Finn were an item when they were younger, and then Finn goes to prison for circumstances which I will not talk about in this particular video because I don't remember the plot. He goes to prison for 20 years, and when he goes into prison, Brenna goes missing. So throughout this whole series, we've known that Finn is in prison and that he's looking for Brenna, and in this book, he gets out and he finally finds her. And so you find out what happened to her, what happened to him, how this all went down, how he ended up in prison, and then why she kind of went off grid for the last 20 years. And so it's all about like reconciling all these things that happened in their past and seeing the two of them come together and finally get their life together. It also wraps up all the other plot points in the Mafia Wars. So there's several stories that have been going on since book 1 that you see nicely wrapped up, and some mysteries you see nicely wrapped up. And then there are some additional mysteries that kind of get thrown in. And again, I've heard rumors that Maggie is doing another Mafia series, and it's going to be surrounding the New York Mafia. This book definitely sets that up if that is what she's deciding to do. I'm hoping she is. But this was a great finale to the series, and one of my favorite books of the series, honestly. And I had a really good cry at the end of this book. So this one got 5 stars from me. The next 4 books I read as part of my Facebook ads video, which I'll link up here for you. I basically did a whole reading vlog where I took books that were recommended to me off of Facebook ads, and I was an interesting mix. The very first one I read was Once a Myth by Pepper Winters, and this one I ended up giving 2 stars to. I had to look because I couldn't remember. I gave this one 2 stars. It's an interesting premise, but I didn't care for it, and I'll tell you why. So in this book, you basically have Eleanor Grace, I can't talk, who is sold into basically sex trafficking. She's kidnapped while on vacation with her boyfriend and taken into sex trafficking, and she is sold to a man who runs an island. And on this island, he rents out, I don't know, what do you want to call it, sells these girls to men who can pick their fantasy. So they'll say, like, I want a brown-haired girl who can do the following things to me, and he sells them out, and they have to do these things. He also drugs the women so that they are willing victims. And I was like, oh, this sounds very much like a certain news story that we keep hearing about on the news every day. It ends on a cliffhanger, and from what I could see, there are several books in this series before the couple actually get an HEA, but in this first book, it just left a really bad taste in my mouth. It was not consensual relationships. She tried to make it seem like it was because she's being drugged, so lots of triggers for many, many, many things. Check your triggers on this one. I will not be continuing the series, and again, I only gave this one 2 stars. It's an interesting premise. I couldn't get behind it. The third book I read was Off Limits by J.A. Lowe. This one I loved. This one was an office romance kind of. The book starts off with Chloe finding out on the night before her wedding that her fiance is cheating on her with her best friend and has her knocked up. So she does a runaway bride and enlists the help of her friend and her brother and runs away. They end up taking her on this like vacation, and it's really fancy like beach resort type thing, which would have been her honeymoon trip, but she's actually just taking it with her friends. And she meets Noah, and her and Noah like each other, but she's literally fresh off of like doing a runaway bride. He's dealing with some issues, and so they are attracted to each other but don't make any moves on it. And then fast forward a little while later, Chloe is starting over in New York and meets the boss of the company she's hired with, and lo and behold, it happens to be Noah, who is the guy she met on the island. And so this whole book is very slow burn. They really don't get together until I would say maybe 50-60% way through. I mean, it's a good halfway through the book, if not more, before the two of them actually act on their feelings and get together. So it's a slow burn. Once it hits, it's very steamy. It's a very sweet romance, watching her get past her past hurts and watching him get past his reservations. It's a little bit predictable. It's not the most like interesting plot in the world. It's a very predictable plot, but it's sweet. I actually really liked this. And it also sets up the other books in the series. You meet those characters and you see those relationships form in this book, but then those characters also have their own books. So I might go back and check out the other books in this series. I actually really liked this one a lot, and I gave it 4 stars. Next book I read was Broken Beast by Kaswell. This one was a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I really enjoyed it. It was definitely different than any other Beauty and the Beast retelling I've ever seen. So I can't remember the names on this one, but the girl is an erotic arts dealer. She literally sells erotic art, and she's responsible for delivering this art to people who purchase her products. And she is selling to the guy who's in this like gothic mansion, and they kind of have this flirtatious moment when she drops off the artwork, and he is like super attracted to her. She's attracted to him. And on the way out, she recognizes him as being this like tech mogul who had a car accident, I think like a year prior, maybe it's a couple years prior, and his brother died in the accident, and he's left heavily scarred. So his face is very scarred, and he always wears long sleeves and suits and like is always very covered up. So long story short, he calls her the next day, and she believes that he is setting up a meeting to buy more art from her. But when she gets there, she finds out that he is actually wanting her to sign a contract and pose as his wife for a year, because his family is very concerned with him after the passing of his brother and the accident, because he's become very depressed and very reclusive, and they're concerned. So he's like, pretend like we're in a relationship, so quit worrying about me and I can just move on with my life. But as all these stories goes, when she moves into his gothic mansion, they end up developing feelings for each other, and you see her kind of break down these walls that he's formed for himself. And one of the most romantic scenes in the whole book is actually a sex scene, which is done, again, I don't read a lot of sex scenes, but this one was done really well, because throughout the whole book and throughout their whole relationship, he never allows her to see him fully nude because he's embarrassed by all the scars. He feels ugly and unattractive because he's covered in all these scars. And finally, there's this one scene where like he takes everything off, and she's like, but what were you nervous about? Because you're beautiful. And he's like, you're lying to me, I'm not beautiful. And she's like, I love you, and that makes you beautiful. And so it was so romantic, and it was actually really well done. It's a very different twist on Beauty and the Beast, and I really liked it. I gave this one 4 stars as well. The only reason I gave this one 4 stars instead of 5, it was a very close to, I almost did like a 4.5, but the reason why I was a little bit lower on my ranking for this one was because it's a super long book, and also there's a lot of characters in this book. She's got a brother, he's got a couple brothers, he's got assistants, there's a lot of characters to keep track of, but I think there's other books. I think this is part of the series. I may have to check this out, but it was really well done, so definitely check it out. And the last book that was on that reading vlog was Waking Olivia by Elizabeth O'Rourke. This one has been talked about here on BookTube a million times. It was on Book Talk a little bit too. And this is the story of she's like a runner, track star, and her coach. So there's actually not that much of an age gap. When I first heard it, I was like, it's an age gap. This is going to be creepy. It's not that much of an age gap. It's a smaller age gap. And essentially she has been like kicked off and or left. I can't remember the details of this. She's been restarting at a new college after losing whatever scholarship or whatever she had at the previous college. And the reason why is because she doesn't perform well. She has this thing where she night runs. Instead of people like sleepwalking. She sleep runs, and no one knows this. She's trying to keep this a secret, but ends up finding, this coach ends up finding out. He's like, why are you so tired in all these races? And then one day he finds her and she's like ran 9 miles or so, like in her sleep in the middle of the night. So he's like, you need to come over to my mom's ranch so I can keep an eye on you the night before these meets to make sure you don't go running for like 9 miles or something, because you're hurting your chances at keeping this scholarship and whatnot. So throughout the course of this and him trying to help her with this sleep running, they fall in love and you see this relationship build. There's a lot of trauma that she has to get past. You find out that this sleep running is actually caused from childhood trauma. So a lot of her secrets from childhood come out. It does read very new adult because she's in college, right? So it's kind of a younger feeling romance. And this is also very much a slow burn. These two don't actually end up acting on the feelings until a good 75% of the way through the book. But it's also done very well. I think this is a great book for someone who wants to get into romance and read a little bit of a darker romance, but doesn't want it to be a steamy. Does that make sense? Like, it's steamy without the graphicness of steaminess. Hopefully that makes sense. This is a good, like, introduction to a good dark romance if you are interested in it. Anyway, I hope I explained that well, but you get my drift. I gave this one 5 stars. And then after this, I decided to read a few novellas because I have a whole list on my TBR. I have my TBR sectioned, okay? And I have a section of novellas that have been recommended. Every once in a while, you'll see booktubers do like a spicy novellas recap or, you know, novella recommendations, a free novellas, like whatever. Lots of people do novella recommendation videos. So I have a whole list of these, but I never tend to read them because I like to read longer books typically. And I was like, I'm going to pull out this list and I'm going to knock off like 3 or 4 of these. So the first one that I started off with was the Nice Girls Naughty Book Club, Quinn. Super cute series of books. There's several different ones and each of them are the Nice Girls Naughty Book Club and they'll have the name of the character. So this one is Quinn. And this is cute. These are these girls that are part of a romance book club in their community. I think it's a library. I might be wrong. Library, bookstore, one of the two. And it usually reads like sweet romances, Christian romances, clean romances. And they're like, we like to read the naughty stuff. So they kind of rebel against this book club and decide to start their own Naughty Girls book club. And so they pick this book and they're going to read it and all this. Well, the one girl's busy working and she's like, I don't have time to read this. Oh, you can get on audiobook. So she's like, I'm going to listen to the audiobook. So she's at work one day. I'm cracking up because this would totally be me. She's at work one day listening to her audiobook and then the spicy scene comes on and her headphones were not plugged in all the way. So this guy at work that she has a super big crush on is suddenly looking at her and she's got the sexy scene in the book playing and she doesn't realize it at first. And then she's like, why is everyone staring at me? Then, oh, because your naughty scene is being read to the entire office. I would have died. This is totally something I would have done. So then obviously she's embarrassed and she runs out and he follows her and they end up forming a relationship. It's a really short book. It's cute. It's actually set up really well because these two are in a, you know, both like each other prior to the book starting. So it's believable. It's cute. I really liked it. And I really want to check out the rest of the books in this little series. I gave this one 4 stars. The next book I checked out was My Dirty Duke by Joanna Shupe. This is a book that was included in the Dukes I'd Like to F anthology. I did not get very far in that anthology because obviously, based on the title, you can tell what kind of stories are in there. But I've heard people say this was a nice historical romance. You should check it out. So I checked it out. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. Basically, the premise of the story is that you have this girl who's like 18 years old, so she's older, and it takes place like, it's historical, so it takes place in historical times. She's got a crush on a duke who is her father's friend, and she's had a crush on him for years and has been watching him for years. And she's like, I'm 18. I want to experience, you know, with this duke I have a crush on. And the whole novella is about her making moves on him and him finally taking her up on it. It's not a bad premise, but I think the reason I had a problem with it, and this is a problem I have with most novellas I read, is that I didn't really feel like there was a connection between the 2 characters. I feel like we got part of the story, but not enough of the story. And I feel like sometimes in these situations, like this book would have been great as like a full-length novel. You know what I mean? Like, it would have been great to see, like, she has a crush on and or is in love with her dad's friend. But why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how did it go from dad's friend to I have a crush to I love this person to I'm willing to, like, you know, in historical times when giving up your V card would have been a huge deal. It would have been great as a full-length novel. As a novella, it was good. It's good if you just want to read a spicy scene novel, but it just didn't have the emotional depth I was going for. It just seemed kind of like a teenage crush kind of thing, more so than a romance to me. So I still gave it 3 stars because I think it's a good read, but I would have liked to have seen more. Book number 8, believe it or not, is a Cora Reilly book. So, look, I'm part of her Flamingos Club on Facebook because, you know, I love my Cora Reilly. I wasn't too happy with the last couple books that she's released. However, I am anxiously waiting and hoping that she improves things for future books in the, Sins of Our Father series because I love these characters. However, I saw her announce that she's working on the Cora Chronicles anthology, and they were talking about the short stories in the Bound in Blood anthology, and I go, but I thought this was literally just an anthology. Like, I thought this was all the books in, like, one big book or something. I did not realize that this is actually just short stories about the characters. I was also super confused when I was reading By Sin I Rise Part 1, because they're talking about, like, all these children that didn't know existed. And now I know why, because apparently this book came out and it's short stories. I don't know how I missed this. So I downloaded it and read, and look, I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. It's Cora Reilly. I love these characters. I've read the whole Born in Blood series, Bound in Blood, whatever it's called, that series. I love them. I've read them. I love the characters. If you have not read the series, you could give 3 farts about this book. Because the only reason we all love it is because we know these characters. It's basically like epilogues, if that makes sense. So instead of at the end of, Luca and Arya's book, giving them an epilogue about them having their child, it's in this book. Instead of, Gianna and Matteo. Instead of Gianna and Matteo getting a really super long epilogue and or an addition to their book, they have a short story in here. So it's literally like kind of like epilogues and or extended epilogues for all the books in these series, pretty much. But it focuses on the Scuderi sisters. So it's Arya, Gianna, and Liliana. I had to think of her name. So I liked it. It was good. I had no idea it existed. And I'm kind of excited because if she's going to do this with my Cora babies, then I'm here for it. Because you all know I love my Cora Chronicles. And I want to see more babies in the Cora. I'm waiting anxiously. Book number 9, continuing on with my novella craze. This is Heaven by Darcy Rose. Y'all, this was a 2-star for me. Look, I couldn't do it. So, literally, it's this stepsister who has a crush on her stepbrother, and there's like a sex club, and he gets roped into meeting her at the sex club, and they sleep together, but they're blindfolded, so she doesn't know it's him at first, and then they do it a second time, and then she finds out it's him, and I'm just like, it's literally, I'm gonna say it, I gave it 2 stars because I think the author did a good job of, like, making you believe that they actually have loved each other and pined after each other for years. But it really felt kind of like a porno book. Do you know what I'm saying by that? Like, it was almost a good story. A little too porno for me. I just, not a lot of plot. A lot of screwing, not a lot of plot. Sorry. But this is me. If you like that sort of thing and you like to read that, that's fine. I like more plot. And then the very last book number 10 that I read was The Royal Rebel by Vivian Wood. This one was actually really cute. I gave it a 3 stars. And the reason I gave it 3 stars is more based on how the characters felt and aged to me. So the way the story goes is you have this girl who's on a vacation with her friend, and they're going to all these underground clubs that are popping up. And while she's there, she meets this guy. He's super cute. She likes him. They exchange numbers. And the next day, they text each other. And she's like, hey, I'm going out to this club again. Do you want to meet me? He says yes. They're super attracted to each other. And they end up spending the night together. And he tells her from day one, like, I don't want pictures of me taken. She can't figure out why. But he's like, don't take pictures of me. Don't take pictures of me. And all of a sudden, in the middle of their act, one time, she's like, hey, I just want a couple pictures just for me and you. Just, you know, and she's like, that's fine. Take pictures, but it has to be private. You cannot share these with anybody, blah, blah, blah. Well, like an idiot, she posts them on Instagram. And she wakes up the next morning to people pounding down his door and going, oh, what are you doing? What is wrong with this girl? Because it turns out that he is a prince. And so she has posted on Instagram that she spent a special night with a certain somebody who happens to be the prince of like Denmark or something like that. And so the book ends on a cliffhanger, and it continues on with a full-length book after this. And it's a great setup. I actually may check out the second book. The only complaint I had here is that the prince is supposed to be 26 years old. I don't remember how old the girl is supposed to be, but their actions in this book really come across as like college students. That's what it feels like to me. He, even though he's supposed to be a prince of Denmark, kind of comes around like a college frat boy. It's how he acts. Not a whole lot of responsibility for much. He's literally acts like a college frat boy, and she acts like she's about 19 or 20. They just act super young. So the age was a little unbelievable for me, especially when she's supposed to be a photographer for the press. Doesn't know he's a prince, which I'm like, hello, you're a photographer for the press. How do you not know who this guy is? So there was a couple like plot holes there. Like they don't feel like they're old enough. Some of this doesn't make sense, but I do want to check out the second book because they were really well written, which is why I gave it 3 stars. And you know me, I am a sucker for royalty romance. So I definitely want to check out the next book, and I hopefully will check it out soon to let you guys know what I think. But I do think this is a great premise. So if you like royalty romance, this is one to check out. And those are my 10 books so far for January. I've read quite a few, but that's mostly because of these novellas. So what have you guys read so far this month? Let me know what's your favorite book that you've read for the first half of the month, and let's see how the rest of January goes. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Bye.